Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Good morning and welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Welcome to the show this morning.
How you doing today?
Doing great. Is it any better for you now that we're past a tax crunch day, or is it busier for you?
You know, we stay busy all year long because my practice focuses primarily on the handling of tax problems. But, you know, the week or two or month before tax deadline time, it is always crazy at the office. It's funny, there's some psychological trigger that just freaks out even people who haven't filed tax returns in 5, 10, 20 years. This week or the last week, they just get really freaked out and they think about it a lot, which I'm happy for because, you know, those thoughts help to propel them to their ultimate solution, their goal of not having tax problems. And, you know, I'm
one
glad.
Of the only people I ever met that encourages not having repeat business.
I do have quite a bit of repeat business, but I have to admit it's a little bit disappointing. You know, if I'd taken a client that 8 years ago or something, I helped them save $100,000 and got their life back on track, and then they come back and they did the same thing again. It makes me feel just a little bit bad because it feels like I empowered them to, screw up their lives again, and that's not what I'm about at all. I'm really about just trying to help people solve the biggest problems that they have in their life, and I'm really passionate about that. And some people just need a couple shots at it, you know, before they understand what they need to do correctly so that they don't ruin at least their financial life.
Well, there's that old saying that you can bring the horse to the water, but you can't make them drink. So, I mean, you can fix it the first time, but it doesn't mean they always learn. And, you know, I think we've all been there. We've made a mistake a couple of times before you finally get it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that I've never made the same mistake twice. I certainly have, and it's an ongoing struggle with all of us as humans, I think, is that, sometimes there's slower learners among us.
I mean, some things more than others, but money's a very emotional issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, because I think, money ultimately represents security, right? Safety, comfort, all those things. And then when you have a breadwinner, the breadwinner for a family, and they start to have money problems, well, geez, I mean, that really makes it hard on them because then I know in my mind, sometimes when you're having financial problems, the things that go through your mind are all the ultimate worst case scenario horror stories. You know, my kids and I will be living under a bridge or, that kind of thing. And that stuff doesn't happen typically.
I think the problem is a lot of times when income changes, the first thing people should change is lifestyle, and they don't.
Yeah, you think?
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you think they ought to maybe consider how they're spending their money, and maybe they should go ahead and cut expenses. But a lot of times we delude ourselves, I think, into thinking that, things are going to get better and we can keep paying for the monthly car wash membership and all these kind of extra things that you don't need. And it's surprising. I look at lots and lots of people's bank statements because it's part of the process to get them, an offer in compromise, which is a deal that you can make with the IRS.
Do we for different reasons.
Yeah, so we look at bank statements a lot, and it never ceases to amaze me some of the things that people spend money on day after day after day. One of those is like, do you remember when you couldn't spend, $7 on a cup of coffee? I remember that time.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. I mean, and it's people.
Well, I remember when $2 was a lot for a cup of coffee, like
Yeah. So, but now there's a huge percentage of the population goes to Starbucks every day, drops, $7. Some of them
can throw them under the bus.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's
more than once,
multiple times a day. And these are sometimes the same people who are saying, they're crying the blues, they don't have any money.
Well, we host FPU in our office, and I know a lot of people that listen to the show maybe are catching this after a Dave Ramsey show. And so that's one of the biggest things. It's kind of like one of the biggest examples we talk about, kick the Starbucks habit. If you don't have a written budget, which that's like FPU 101, we help people get a written budget. Mm-hmm. Start with your bank statement and look at last month and itemize, categorize what you spent where. And then try to figure out where your money went last month.
I actually don't drink coffee, so I don't know if I'm qualified to even talk about this. But I do know that when you go to the grocery store, you can buy really high-end coffee, and it does not come close to $7 a cup.
No, we're talking about 50 cents or so.
And coffee machines are like cheap and sometimes free, right? Isn't there that one coffee brand that will send you a free coffee pot if you sign up for their subscription coffee.
Probably. I'm so spoiled on my Keurig. Like, that's just my thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so our show for today is not coffee, believe it or not, but it is 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return. So you want to jump into number 1, which is it must be filed on paper.
Yep. Cannot be e-filed. Just cannot happen. Has to be filed on a form called a 1040X. The form's not really that hard. It's either the form 1040X is a 1-pager, but typically if you're going to amend your return, you have to amend, you have to prepare like how you wanted the 1040 to look. And so, it cannot be filed electronically. It has to be filed in paper. You can get the form at irs.gov. That's irs.gov, like government. And important to note that you need to send that in via mail, so it's in paper. And I would suggest that you send it via certified mail every time. I have a rule in my office, and that is that when you're asking the IRS for something, in writing via mail, it has to be certified mail for sure. If there's any kind of deadline at all, even deadlines you weren't aware of, has to be certified for sure.
Isn't everything with the IRS now pretty much on paper, with the exception of like the original 1040s that get e-filed? Because I'm just curious about that.
You mean everything else that you send in?
Like we can file electronically now because the IRS has come a long way that allows you to do that. So isn't that pretty much like those on-time early returns, the easy stuff that can be filed online?
Yeah. Well, actually, they've extended e-filing to where you can file some late returns too. I think it goes back 3 years, which is kind of cool because, in my practice, we do an awful lot of returns that are way past the deadline. And so you can e-file some of those. A lot of what the IRS still does is in paper. The funny thing is the IRS's idea of high technology is a fax. The explanation is that they're using fax because it's more secure. They're saying it's more secure than email. Here's the irony in this statement. Well, they use an e-fax that shows up where?
In your email.
In their email. So I don't get it. It's just the IRS. It's just government bureaucracy. Probably the answer is some crony, owns the e-fax company and got the contract. That's probably what's going on. But needless to say, those 1040Xs, those amended returns have to be filed in writing. Get the forms on the IRS website.
So what's number 2 on our list of 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return?
Well, you want to amend to correct errors. And there was a caller last week named Shirley, and I wish that she had called this week because...
Was it Shirley or was it Cherie, Pat? Do you remember? I think we're messing her name up.
It was Cherie.
Okay, I'm sorry about
Cherie.
All
and
right.
the way she said it sounded like Shirley.
She had a cute accent.
I think she was Australian or something.
Yeah.
So, and her question was, she had a couple years of returns that she has on depreciation that she had left off for some rental property, and she wanted to know if it was worth it to go ahead and amend. And if she was going to amend, should she use a tax preparer or should she do it herself? And the answer is, I think she should use a tax preparer to amend that depreciation, even if it doesn't generate a large refund. Even if it costs her some money, she should go ahead and amend those returns because leaving the depreciation off is an error and could, although I think kind of unlikely, could lead to an audit. And then now you've got actual real problems here,
But the depreciation's actually in her favor.
Yeah, the depreciation's in her favor. And it's my understanding that the depreciation can't have a lapse in it. So she needed to fix those returns so that she continued to depreciate those rental properties, in years going forward. So
maybe she was worried about an audit or something in between.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly she was worried about, but I think we put her on the right track.
Yeah, we only had a couple minutes to answer the question, so it was real fast.
Yeah, she actually sucked up the train wreck segment on that show.
We promised 2 this week. We're going to do it.
I don't know if I have 2 to generate, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot.
Of course you do. So number 3 on our list is don't amend for math errors or missing forms.
Yeah, let's talk about what math errors are. Math errors are arithmetic errors, where you just didn't. You're doing a return by hand and you add up the numbers wrong.
I haven't even heard that word in so long. I'm just saying.
So you're saying, though, if you have a tax preparation person, make sure they didn't master in English. They should master in, math.
The crazy part is I could totally see that happening because we see math errors on appraisals where they're making adjustments like to the subject property. It should be better or worse, and they adjust it the wrong way.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of math errors on computer generated returns anymore because the computer isn't going to make an error adding 6 plus 9. It's just not going to happen. But it does happen on hand-prepared returns, self-prepared returns. I didn't think that many people did that, but a lady came in last week, and she showed me 3 years' worth of returns that she had done longhand using a pencil. And I was like thinking to myself, I didn't say this to her because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I was like, wow, I haven't seen one of those in like 15 years.
What, a pencil?
Yeah, a pencil or a handwritten.
How much of the eraser was left? That's what I'm worried about.
Well, when you do handwritten returns, you actually should use a pencil, and that's because you can erase the mistakes. But then you can't send it in pencil. It has to be photocopied first, and then you can sign it. You can send it in like that. Back in the day, so like 20 years ago, that's what I would do when I had to do a return by hand. Like let's say I had to do a return by hand because it was from 9 years prior, and I didn't have the software. So we would just download the forms and just kind of do them by hand like that.
Oh, there's the music. You're listening to 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return. When we come back, we're going to hop on into number 4. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with Mr. Darrin T. Mish. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with Mr. Darrin T. Mish.
That would be me, the IRS Solution Attorney.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. If you're just catching the show, we're talking about 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return. And I think we left off on number 4, which is Form 1095A, health insurance.
Yeah.
Marketplace statement errors.
Yeah, the 1095A is this weird Obamacare thing that we get now. It's only been out a year or two. And what it is, it's a form that covers whether or not you were covered with health care for the year. And some taxpayers may get a second Form 1095A because the information on their initial form was incorrect or incomplete. And if you filed a 2015 tax return based on the initial Form 1095A and claim the premium tax credit using the incorrect information, then you're going to go ahead and have to file an amended return to fix that. Otherwise, you're going to get a love letter from the IRS, probably a letter called a CP2000, and they're going to fix it. But when they fix it, this is in quotes, they're going to fix it. They're going to fix it in their favor, not in your favor. So you're going to want to go ahead and get that done. It shouldn't affect that many people, but you never know. If you're the one that's listening and that's your problem, then you're going to want to go ahead and file an amendment.
Have you seen any audit-related stuff to this Obamacare shared social responsibility payment craziness?
We haven't seen the full-blown audit, because there's not much to audit there, right? It's either you were covered or you weren't covered. And
I was just curious if you've seen any, I guess audit was the wrong word, but like weird notices around this.
Yeah, we're starting to get weird notices. And remember the bizarre name that they call it. They call it the shared responsibility payment because we're in, 1984 world, George Orwellian kind of statement. What the heck is a shared responsibility payment? Well, what it is, it's like
IRS's way of saying you need health insurance.
Yeah, it's IRS's bizarro way of saying that
Obamacare.
That you have the penalty for Obamacare. I guess they didn't want to put Obama's name on the. They didn't want to call the penalty Obama or Obamacare, so they called it
Obama penalty.
Shared responsibility payment. We all have this shared responsibility to make sure we all have health insurance,
and that we pay our taxes.
Not. Anyway,
that's kind of the idea. Anyway, so our topic for today is 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return. And number 5 is a 3-year time limit.
There is, in fact, a 3-year time limit to amend a tax return. And why is this important? Well, it's important because there's a 3-year statute of limitations to obtain a refund as well. So what we see in this context, we see this quite a bit, and that is that...
And I don't understand that. I've seen people that don't. Like, I had a lady once that hadn't filed tax returns in years, and she was an employee for the school, so she was a W-2.
I see it all the time.
It just didn't make sense. Like, you'll be likely getting a refund every year.
I have a good friend that works at one of the big boat, marine supply companies in town, and we got to be friends over the years because I kept going in there buying stuff. And one day he shared with me, he asked me what kind of attorney I was early on in our relationship, and I told him, and then...
Wait, how do you answer that? When someone asks you what kind of attorney you are, what do you say?
Oh, I say, well, I help people who owe too much money to the IRS get out of paying it. That's what I say. Now, here's the disclaimer real quick, okay? I cannot help every person in every situation, and I can't guarantee any results, okay?
That's my attorney answer.
That's the Florida Bar disclaimer.
Florida Bar.
I cannot help everybody in every situation, but that's what I typically tell people when they ask me what kind of work I do. And when I was a criminal defense attorney and I told people what I did at a cocktail party, they would kind of like go, oh, how nice. And they would kind of slink away and I'd never see them again. But nowadays what happens is everybody, almost without fail, says, oh, let me get one of your cards. You just never know. And that's because all of us are kind of taxpayers in one way, shape, or form.
Either they owe money or they know somebody that owes money or they're scared one day they might owe money.
Yeah, and I have a tendency to hang around with entrepreneurs and small business owners and things. And
they always owe money.
They always owe money, and so it just makes for a really good recipe. But and this particular gentleman was working at the Marine Supply House for years, decades. And he shared with me, he goes, Darrin, I haven't filed a tax return in a long time. I'm like, what?
What's a long time?
And he says, I don't believe in being in the system. And if they don't know what I'm doing, then I'm happier. It's a privacy thing. And I'm like, dude, you're getting W-2s. They already know how much money you make. They already know who you are. The reason that they're not preparing returns for him is because he was entitled to refunds, for decades. And so they were just kind of chalking it up to, cool, we're going to keep that guy's money. Ultimately, we had to get him, for another reason, we had to get him caught up. And so we did the last 6 years of returns because that's sort of our standard practice. If you're a non-filer for many years, the general rule is you only have to file the past 6 years because the statute of limitations for the crime of failure to file a tax return is only 6 years. So we got him filed the past 6 years, got him up to date.
But so he has to file 6 years, but only gets 3.
He only got the refunds for 3 years. So
seems a little unfair, but
It is, but the tax laws were not written for the people. They were written for, the government.
We the people.
They weren't written for the people. They were written for the government, and they were written to generate revenue. And so for whatever reason, Congress has decided that 3 years is an appropriate time to get a refund. Now, interestingly, was there any penalties and interest applied to those refund returns that weren't filed on time? Do you know the answer?
No. Yes, aren't they supposed to? Isn't the answer yes?
Is the answer?
It's a trick question.
Were you saying you don't know the answer?
No,
or are you saying
what I'm
answering
saying is you definitely have to check because I learned a lot from the show, but I don't remember everything because I can just call you and ask you whatever I don't remember. But what I'm thinking is that they are entitled to interest, right, on the money, but not penalties. Is that right?
Well, typically you don't see interest on there, but there's no penalties attached. There's no penalty for filing a late
I got the
refund
no penalty,
return.
Right? Did they get interest?
Typically not. There are some situations where you're going to get interest on a late refund.
I was almost right.
If you file an amended return and there's a refund generated, I do know that you get interest on that. I'm not remembering right now if you get interest on just a typical late filed initial filing on a refund.
We're talking about amending.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't remember that. But I know you do on an amended return.
That's not your normal client.
Yeah, and usually those refunds are offset by the money that they owe in prior years.
I don't think anybody
anyway.
cares. That's probably if they're getting money and they don't owe money.
Yeah.
They're not really looking, but I want to say they do. I just can't remember for sure.
So there's a 3-year time limit to file the amended returns, and that's just really important. So, for example, if you had a 2012 tax return that you wanted to amend, it's too late. It had to be filed by April the 15th, I believe. We'll call it the 18th in this case, but I think it had to be filed by
2016.
I think it had to be filed by April 15th of 2016, and it's now past that. So you can no longer amend a 2012 tax return for really any reason.
So number 6 on our list of things that are 9 tips to keep in mind when you have to amend a tax return is going to be, I can't even believe this is on here, so you're going to have to just clear the air, but separate forms for each year. Really?
And you don't believe it's on there just because you think it's too obvious?
Well, yeah. Okay, I mean, do people really try to file 1 year together, like for many?
Yeah, for sure they do. And it actually makes sense. Any other business that you're doing business with, you can put, if you're paying, well, maybe that's not a great example, but any other business you could put... Yeah,
because I'm really trying to follow number 6 on this.
Any other business you could put like stuff in an envelope to the same organization that you're dealing with, and they could handle that. Well, the IRS cannot handle having 2 years of tax information in one envelope.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah, they cannot handle it. What they do is they just staple the stuff together, and it gets sent off for processing, and it gets processed as 1 year. So what I would say is make sure if you're amending, for like in Cherie's, I guess that's her name, case from last week, she had 2 years to amend. do separate 1040Xs for each year and then put those in separate envelopes and mail them separately. Otherwise,
they can't even be in one envelope.
No, they cannot be in one envelope. If they're in one envelope, they're going to be stapled together and it's going to get jacked up. That's a technical term, jacked up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that you learn having dealt with the IRS for many years is there's just certain things that get short-circuited no matter what.
Did you know that, Pat? Like, did you imagine in a million years that if you put two
Absolutely
returns in
not.
one
No,
envelope?
I think that's crazy because say you're 6 years and you got to send them all in. That's 6 pieces of different envelopes. That one of those could get lost,
Well, you
and
would
then
think
you
they'd all
start all over
be
again.
stapled anyway. Like,
And all 6 of those should go certified mail.
Okay.
Because you're going to
Well,
want to make sure you can prove. And on the certified slips, if you're sending a whole bunch of them, make sure on your receipt to write some kind of notation so that you know you can prove what was in each envelope. Otherwise, they might try to play the shenanigan of,
wait,
well,
what? What are you saying?
So on your receipt, your green slip that you get.
Right, which year that was?
Yeah, make a little note somewhere on it so that you know what year that certified slip went to. Otherwise, you will have no idea. Let's say one gets lost. You'll be like, great. I don't know which one that was, but one of them got lost. One of them did get delivered.
The IRS would let you know.
Incidentally, I think the Postal Service is darn reliable.
Did you know that postage went down? Did
I
you see
know.
that?
It's amazing. It's amazing. As someone who spends a lot of money on postage, I'm really happy to see that. But first time in history.
I know.
Went down.
I saw that in the news, and they were like, "Yeah, it went down." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, instead of
double
getting
take.
2 quarters instead of a penny back, you get 3 pennies. What are you going to do with any of those pennies?
They're saying that they're trying to generate revenue for the Postal Service.
I think if I was in charge, I'd probably just round it off to 50 cents to do that.
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We have to take our hard break at the bottom of the hour. Our studio call-in line's 888-404-1010, 888-404-1010. And if you want to catch Darrin in his office, 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. We'll be back in just a minute. We'll hop into number 7.
Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin T. Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin T. Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa. Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, joined again by my co-host Katrina Madewell. How you doing?
Doing great, Mr. Darrin T. Mish.
Today we're talking about the 9 tips to keep in mind when you're amending your tax return, because we're past the tax season now, and now we're into thinking about, wow, I might have made a mistake on that.
Last week, not even like Monday.
Yeah, might have made a mistake on that tax return. What do I do now? So,
just to do a quick recap, because with Talk Radio, we know that you guys are getting in and out of your car and that kind of stuff. And you can catch this whole show on a podcast in its entirety. On iTunes, just go ahead and search for Darrin Mish, or you can search for, I believe the podcast is called the IRS Problem Solver. It's one of those things we can't reconcile. I know we should, and we're going to work on that pretty soon, though. Our Android app is out, which is pretty cool. And our app for iTunes should be coming out any day. Because Apple they
really
take a little longer, Yeah,
if when the app comes out on iTunes, or if you have an Android, go ahead and download that. You can listen to all of the shows in their entirety. Not sure if commercials are in there or not, but
they are.
They are.
Thanks to our sponsors. Thank you.
So I actually have clients call in from all over the country. A lot of people don't know this. They think that I'm in Florida and I can only represent taxpayers in Florida. But because the IRS is federal in nature, I can actually represent clients in all 50 states. And I have represented clients in all 50 states.
Even other countries, people call you.
Other countries, Americans in other countries have to file tax returns. And I've represented clients on every continent except for Antarctica. And I have a standing offer. If you are an American in Antarctica and you have a tax problem, call me. I'll take care of it for free. Got to wrap up the entire world.
So you have represented everybody in the whole world.
And there's actually, I did some research on, I think it's called the Ross Station. I'm not sure, but there's basically a very large town on Antarctica during the summer months of Americans. It's thousands of people are there.
You're going to have to take a business trip during that time.
There's actually hundreds of people that overwinter in Antarctica, which is definitely not my thing. But it looks like a cool place to go in the summertime for sure.
So our 9 tips to keep in mind when you want to amend a tax return. Number 1 is you must file it on paper.
Yeah, they got to be filed on paper, cannot be e-filed. Number 2 is you would amend a tax return to correct errors. And they don't have to be errors in your favor or in the IRS's favor. You just want to correct errors. And we're talking significant errors. We're not talking about number 3, which is math errors. If you added 15 plus 16 wrong,
like you missed something,
then the computer at the IRS is going to go ahead and take care of that for you, and they're going to send you a letter that said, hey, we caught a math error, and we're going to take care of it. I don't see very many of those notices anymore, but they do happen on rare occasions.
Number 3 in our list is don't amend for math errors and missing forms.
Yep, absolutely. So if you're missing a tax form like a W-2 or some kind of schedule, the IRS will go ahead and send you a letter and say, hey, you forgot that. We need a copy of it or whatever. Have an interesting case going on right now where they're saying that the W-2s were not mailed in. And the irony is we got the transcripts from the IRS of the W-2s that were sent to them by the employers. And the IRS got them all. So in our response, we sent them the copies of the IRS's own transcripts and hard copies of the actual W-2s that the taxpayer had in their possession that incidentally were mailed with the return originally. And so I don't know what happened in that case. Just some kind of computer, snafu. Number 4 is, if you might have gotten 2 Form 1095As. Those are the Obamacare, statements showing that you had how much you had of a subsidy if you got one, and whether or not you had health insurance for the year. Sometimes you're going to get 2 of those in a given year. You might get the second one after you filed your return. If that happens to you, amend the return, take care of it.
3-year time limit was number 5.
Yeah, there's a 3-year time limit for filing an amended return, which means if you were going to have to file, if you wanted to amend a 2012 return, it's too late now to do that because it was due in 2013 and April 18th in this case is already passed, so it's too late to go ahead and file.
Number 6 was filing separate forms and envelopes for each year. We learned that in the last segment.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and if you're going to amend a tax return, you just don't want to amend you just want to do separate paperwork, send it in separately in separate envelopes for each year.
And that brings us up to speed with number 7, which is attaching other forms with the changes.
Yeah, so let's say you found a mistake on your itemized deductions on Schedule A. Maybe you put the mortgage interest down wrong, or maybe you didn't include the mortgage interest for your second mortgage. That could happen, right? And so you wanted to change the Schedule A. Well, you can't just write down on the 1040X the change and then not show the Schedule A to show what change you made. And you also should show what change that made to do, on the whole 1040 itself. So you want to make sure that you attach the other forms with changes. It's kind of like, remember when we were kids in school in math and they used to say, show your work?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here. We're showing our work.
Write it out.
If we don't show our work, then we're not going to get the change. Interestingly, a lot of people don't know this. You're not entitled to have an amended return accepted. Did you know that?
No.
If you file an amended return that's just like phony baloney, crazy time, the IRS is going to look at it.
They can just reject it?
They're just going to be like, no, we're not taking that. So you don't have a right to it. You don't see that often. You typically see that where the position that you're trying to take on the amended return is just kooky. And then, that's going to get booted out.
So number 8 on our list is when to file for corrected refund.
So if you're due a refund from your original return, wait to get it before filing 1040X to claim an additional refund. Amended returns can take up to 16 weeks to process, and what will happen in that case is you'll delay your entire refund because they're going to wait to file, process the amended return and cut you just one check. So I wish it didn't take 16 weeks to do an amended return, but that seems to be the current sort of
I think everybody
timeline.
knows nothing with the IRS is fast, unfortunately, or the government.
Except for levies and liens.
Well,
they can be faster than we would like, right?
But that's usually a process that gets you to that
they
point.
actually aren't fast, but they just seem fast when you've been burying your head in the sand for years.
Number 9 on our list is pay additional tax. So if you owe additional taxes.
Yeah, if you owe more tax, you're going to want to file your Form 1040X and pay the tax as soon as you can, because otherwise you're going to have additional penalties and interest, running up on that additional tax that you owe. And incidentally, it's backdated to the due date of the return. So let's say you file a 2015 return and you filed it on April 18th. And then in June, you're like, oh, shoot, I got to amend this return. I owe some more tax. Well, you have to pay the penalties and interest on the tax back to April 18th. Don't worry. You don't have to calculate that. The IRS will
be more than happy to calculate that for you.
The helpful, friendly IRS will calculate that for you and send you a bill.
So if you want to reach out to Darrin, you can get him on his off-air office line, which is 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH, which is
888-438-6474. That's 888-438-6474.
And he's on Twitter at Darrin_Twitter and Facebook.
Darrin, that would be kind of cool. It's Darrin_Mish. That's MISH.
Wait, what did I say? I don't even know
what I said. Darrin_Twitter.
See, I'm tired.
What is your cell number?
My cell number is 888-438-6474. Not really.
How about that? Gives out his cell, too.
Incidentally, I have a friend who has a billboard in Tampa.
You forget that these people don't sleep at night, Pat, so they'll be calling him literally when Darrin's trying to sleep and get up the next day to help somebody on a normal schedule.
I have a friend, really an acquaintance, that has billboards in Tampa. He's a personal injury attorney, and he says, call me on my cell. And the cell number's on the billboard.
I drove past that the other day, and I'm like, what?
And I was talking to him a couple of months ago, and I was like, dude, every time I'm coming back late at night, I feel like calling you on your cell.
And don't think people don't do that.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
He said, yeah, people do it. But
probably all hours of the night.
Yeah, probably.
So we did get some questions. One of the questions that we got from our listeners, and we had a lot last week. We didn't have a chance to get to them all, but I'm a little bit nervous about my return because I fudged the numbers a bit when I was using TurboTax. It wasn't much, but it did get me an extra $775 on my refund. Should I file an amended return? That's from Josie.
Well, Josie, I don't know. What's your tolerance for risk? Okay, so the standard answer is...
I would say don't poke the beast with
a
stick.
Really?
That would be my guess.
So
I'm not the IRS attorney.
The non-attorney advice is,
she's only saying that because you're on her side. That's why she's saying that.
I wouldn't poke the beast.
Katrina's advice is, it's only $775.
Not my advice, just my thought.
No, that's her advice. We're going to go down on record as her advice. But no, Josie, I think you ought to do the right thing.
So you're saying file the amended return? I
think you should file an amended return, and you should own up to the fudging. Let me tell you why.
That's a better answer.
I think I shared the other day, I was at lunch with a former tax division attorney from the United States Attorney's Office. So his job used to be to prosecute taxpayers, or non-taxpayers in this case, right? Or so he would prosecute people for tax crimes. That's a better way to say it. And so at lunch, we were talking, and I was trying to get him to tell me, like, how do you make prosecution decisions? Because most of my clients are non-filers, meaning they haven't filed a tax return in a long time, and that's technically a crime not to file a tax return. It's called failure to file, and it's a federal misdemeanor. And he says, Darrin, we didn't used to prosecute very many people for failure to file because it's a misdemeanor, and it's just not really that sexy. It didn't get us all worked up. It's just kind of like, well, whatever, He says, but the people that we would like to prosecute were the people who committed tax fraud. Now, Josie, I think what you've done is tax fraud in a way. Do I think it's particularly serious tax fraud? No, I don't think it's particularly serious, but I think it is. If you lie or if you make a misrepresentation, fudge.
That was the word.
Yeah, that was the word. If you fudge on your tax return knowingly, then technically you could be prosecuted for a crime. And I don't know about you, but $775 ain't worth any risk.
It's not worth fighting with the IRS.
It's not worth any risk in my mind of going to prison. Do I think it would happen? Not really. I think there's an infinitesimally small chance that could happen. But,
Do you think they look at people more on audits for fudging if they get a refund versus not?
I don't know if I've ever represented a taxpayer in an audit where there wasn't fudging going on.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I just have a hunch.
Yeah, there's a lot of fudging. I would just say the correct answer is go ahead and just amend that. You're going to sleep better at night. You're going to feel better about yourself.
It's obviously bugging her because she asked us.
Yeah, exactly. And TurboTax has that little running tab thing going on, and I know the temptation.
It's kind of a bad thing, really.
It is a bad thing, and I know about the temptation, and I don't think, I don't blame you, but I think you should fix it.
So we do have another question from Rick. He wants to know, how bad is not having health insurance going to affect my tax bill? I'm 23. I just graduated from school, and I'm great in health. So, so he's got good health. He doesn't have health insurance. He just doesn't know why he has to get insurance at all, which is a valid question for 23 years old.
I'm not that boned up on this stuff. I think that penalty for this gentleman is going to be really small, because the penalty is based upon, my understanding is it's based upon your income. And
maybe just graduated from college.
Yeah, so I think I've heard that the penalty can be as low as $25, and but I've also heard it could be in the thousands. I personally know people who were fined, a couple $1,000s, but I think that was based upon their income. So it's a sliding scale kind of thing. You're going to have to make the decision, Rick, on whether or not it's worth paying the money for health insurance for, you're young and healthy, or if, you want to pay the penalty. I don't think it's going to be that much in your case, though.
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We have to take a quick break. We will be back in a few minutes, and we promise you that double train wreck of the week, and we will do both of those when we come back. Welcome back. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with Mr. Darrin T. Mish.
You forgot to say the IRS Solution Attorney. That'd be me.
It's been a long day already.
Today we're talking about 9 tips to keep in mind when amending your tax return. I don't think we have time to recap in this segment.
No, we don't. We did earlier, but you can catch the whole thing on a podcast in its entirety.
I think we're on number...
No, we did all of them, all 9.
No, we didn't do number 8. That's when to file for a corrected refund. If you're due a refund from your original return, wait to get it before. Oh, we did talk about that. Come to think of it,
we did.
And number 9 is actually, I don't think we talked about that one. We did pay any tax you owe. Go ahead and make sure you pay that. So
we did. You're going to have to listen to your own podcast, Darrin.
When you do enough radio, you kind of lose track of what you've said before and what you can't remember. And
sometimes they run together, especially when you have a couple hours of time.
It could be a bit of a senior moment too, actually.
Oh, I love that. I'm surprised I didn't think of that one first. Okay. All right, it's about that time.
Then this week we have a double IRS train wreck of the week.
That's right,
Isn't that
because
true?
we ran out of time last week.
We ran out of time last week, so we're going to reward you this time in this segment with 2
caller.
IRS train wrecks of the week. Really interesting case. Just settled last week, actually. I was really happy for her. What happened is an older couple came in, and they showed me a bill from the IRS for $58,368.25. Now, in my practice, that's
what
kind of...
What does the bill say? I'm just curious. I've never gotten a tax bill for that. So what does it say when they bring it in?
Well, it depends on how many prior bills they've gotten. Okay. If it's the first bill, it says you owe us $58,368.25, and you have 10 days to pay. Thank you very much.
That's a little scary. No wonder they come running into your office. Now I get it.
Now, if they've gotten prior notices, then they get increasingly more frightening, and then they start to talk about levying, taking your stuff, and then that's usually... In most people, that's what generates, some kind of sort of actual interest, and they come in to deal with it. But in this case, they brought me the big tax bill for $58,000, and as is my practice typically, is I just said, okay, so how did this happen? What generated this tax bill? And she said, well, I had some student loan debt that just out of the blue was forgiven, and then out of the and I thought that was great. And then out of the blue, I get a 1099-C for cancellation of debt. And so then I learned that Congress says that I have to pay taxes on debt that's canceled as if I had gotten the money and used the money to pay the debt off. And so when I did my self-prepared tax return, I owed $58,000. Like, what am I going to do? We don't have that kind of money. We're living on a fixed income. Like, we're in big trouble here. And so I think most practitioners, their first, in my business anyway, their first thought would be, okay, well, they're senior citizens, they're on a fixed income, they have limited assets, let's do an offer and compromise. That's where you make a deal to settle for less. And that's actually in our second train wreck. We're going to talk about a successful offer and compromise. But in this case, no, offer and compromise isn't the best, easiest way, quickest way, cheapest way to get this done. I identified that she was actually insolvent at the time the debt was canceled because, let's face it, do creditors just write off debt if you have money? Not usually, right? So in this case, what we had her do is we had her fill out an insolvency worksheet. We filed an amended return in keeping with the theme of the show.
We've talked about insolvency a little bit. I know what that is, but can you explain to the person listening just in case they're curious what that is?
Sure. Insolvency simply means that your liabilities, your bills, outweigh your assets, your stuff, your money. your valuables. And so in this case, in most people, quite frankly, let's be honest, aren't most people, if they're not insolvent, they're pretty close. Don't you think?
A lot. I don't know. I mean, Dave Ramsey airs on the show, and he also promotes savings. So
yeah,
it could
but
be a good mix.
homeowners are not usually insolvent because they have some equity in their house, and maybe they own some stocks and bonds and retirement accounts and stuff like that. But a lot of people that come to me because they have big debt problems, they're insolvent. And this lady was insolvent. She filed an amended return, and you know what the coolest thing was? She got a $7,678.19 refund. So we turned that case around from owing $58,000 to getting $7,600 back. And I can say, I won't say what my fee was, but it was way less than the refund check.
We got to load up some boom music for stories like that.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like dropping the mic, but it's on a boom here, so I can't really drop the mic. But that's a pretty darn good solution in that case. And I have to say, I was really, really, really happy for them. And I know that they're really happy as well.
I mean, that's a pretty good...
Yeah.
That's a pretty good resolution to a $58,000 tax bill.
Yeah, for sure. In our second train wreck of the week, we're going to talk about an offer and compromise that actually worked. And this was an interesting case. It was a retired couple that had actually, they lived here in the Tampa area. And what had happened was the husband was the only one that owed the tax debt. The wife did not owe the tax debt at all. And they were living on a fixed income. And they had moved to another area, actually. They'd gone through a bankruptcy earlier for some other tax debt and just some other debt in general. And husband had to file a bankruptcy, and the taxes were not entirely discharged in that bankruptcy. So after the bankruptcy, he came back to me because I can't represent him while he's in bankruptcy, okay? Because the bankruptcy just tolls everything, just stops everything, kind of puts everything on ice. And I can't deal with the IRS while taxpayers in bankruptcy. So he came back to me after the bankruptcy, and he owed $192,000 in change. I don't remember exactly.
After the bankruptcy?
After the bankruptcy, he still owed $192,000 and change. The cool thing was he was in a Chapter 13 for a lot of years, and so he got older, and his financial situation got worse. And so we filed an offer and compromise, and I can't recall exactly what we offered. We offered a pretty small amount, like $7,500. And ultimately it came back at being settled at $9,150. And what's really cool is I follow the wife in this couple on Facebook, and she follows me. And so now I get to see what their life is like. They post pictures of when they're on vacation and when they're spending time with their family and that kind of thing. And it makes me feel really, really good that this is an older couple, and they're living out the rest of their years without this just crushing tax debt on them, and they're enjoying life. And it makes me feel really good. They just went on a cruise. And if they had still had the tax debt, there's no way they're going to go on a cruise. And let's face it, we are all kind of have limited time here on the planet, and you can spend your time, worrying and dealing with the IRS, or you can spend your time going on cruises.
Which is just crazy. That just seems unconstitutional to me.
I'm going on the cruises.
Yeah, actually, I follow Pat on Facebook as well, and Pat went on a cruise. That day he got off, he didn't look that good.
Well, we had a lot of fun.
It looked like you had fun. Were you able to post on Facebook on the ship? I think you did.
No,
right?
just until you get out by the Skyway, and then it's over.
Yeah, then it's all gone. There is Wi-Fi on the ship, which is really
yeah, like $43 a minute.
It's really, I mean, there's a reason why it's so expensive. Is because when you go on a cruise, you're kind of supposed to be disconnected. Like, that's the whole idea.
Yeah, okay. I got you. You shouldn't be in the internet cafe there, working on taxpayers' problems and stuff.
I recommend not getting a big room because everybody comes to your room and parties, and that's why I look that way.
Oh, so you had the big junior suite or whatever?
And a big balcony, and luckily no one fell over.
Oh, my gosh.
So my kids have been on so many cruises that now they're talking about they want to get, the suite at the stern with the butler and the baby grand piano and all that. No, these kids aren't spoiled at all, but, that they are the reason.
My kids are lucky just to go.
They are the reason why I do what I do and why I help as many people as I do.
We all do. I think we all do. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We've had so much fun hanging out with you guys this week. Sorry we didn't have a chance to take any calls. We promised that double train wreck this week. But you can reach Darrin at 888-GET-MISH.
888-438-6474. Or you can visit the website at getirshelp.com.
Getirshelp.com, 888-GET-MISH. Thanks for listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. For this week, we're out.